All right. Good evening, everybody. Since 2020, when we were shut down in July of 2020, a group of us started doing some kind of a program this first week of July to honor Reverend Della Reese's birthday, or more properly, Reverend Dr. Della Reese Lett. Um, or Karen Evans would say Reverend Dr. Della Reese Patricia Early Lett. But anyway, all those names, that person. And yesterday was her official on the birth certificate birthday. But if you knew her for a second, you know that she did not celebrate a birthday. She celebrated the birth month. Because why limit yourself to one day of celebrations when there are 31 days in the month available? So um, this year, what we wanted to do something a little different was along the lines of the title of Della's autobiography, which is "Angels Along the Way," and that's her autobiography. But it also kind of went along kind of the thread of the television show that perhaps made her the most famous to people of anything else, which was the television show Touched by an Angel. And so what we wanted to do was really kind of honor um, her by people telling stories of how other human beings showed up in our lives and in ways that really kind of seemed angelic and divine in being helpful and that sort of thing. So um, I want to introduce the other ministers that are here with me, and then I'm going to start by letting Reverend Della be the first one to tell a story of how a couple of people showed up as angels for her, and one of my favorite stories of hers. But I want to first introduce Reverend Elise Cohen, and she is a Unity minister with Unity Worldwide Ministries. And then Reverend John Downey III, who is the assistant minister at Up Church, which is a UFBL church and is the church that was founded by Reverend Della. And so I'm grateful to have them with me to tell some stories. And we've got a video from Reverend Sherry James, who's a senior minister at Up Church, and she wanted to be with us tonight, but she's not able to. So um, yeah, let's start this off. And this is a favorite story of mine. Look, I don't know the exact year that this happened. I think I knew at one point, though, from some research I did. This happened in Las Vegas. I believe it was at the Desert Inn Hotel. It was certainly in the early 60s, maybe even 1960. And by then, Della was already a very successful recording artist. She had already had what became her only number one hit, which was "Don't You Know." That happened in 1959, or maybe even a year or two before that. But it was already a hit, and she was already performing on the Ed Sullivan Show. And Ed Sullivan invited her to participate in a show that he was doing in Las Vegas. And I that will be my setup. And now let me find all the right buttons to push to get us to the other place. Okay, one second. That's Reverend Sherry James. We're going to tell hers in a little bit. Oh, wait. I'm not convinced that I hit the sound button I was supposed to hit when I shared. So let me make sure I do this right and go back and hit that button. Okay, I did. So here we go.
Sammy Davis Jr., Lena Horne,
Mm-hmm.
Billy Daniels, Billy Eckstein, myself, Sarah, Ella. We could go to Vegas and we could work in Vegas, but we couldn't eat in there. We couldn't sleep in there. We really couldn't go to the bathroom in there. You had to
Wow.
go backstage to go. And as soon as you were finished, you had to get off of the property. And I hadn't thought about that because I was so glad it was over.
Sure.
Um, tell you a story. I did the Sullivan Show, and I did it 17 times in a year
My.
because because the Autumn Concerto was his love song to Mrs. Sullivan. And I did an adaptation of that called And That Reminds Me. So every time he wanted, there was a time you couldn't speak to anybody on television.
Right, right,
You couldn't
right.
speak through the television to anybody, or you couldn't dedicate anything to anybody. So what he would do, he would have me come on and sing And That Reminds Me to his wife, because he loved to tell her that for her birthday, for Christmas, whatever.
So you were just up there singing it.
Up there singing
That's
17 times in a year. So he took me with him to Vegas. And there's a place called the Dust Bowl, way on the other side, and it was named right. There wasn't a piece of cement
Just
over
the
there
Dust
anywhere. It
Bowl.
was just a dusty place. And Dr. West and his wife built some houses so that the black entertainers, would have some place to stay. And so I'm late getting there, and I get there, and I haven't had anything to eat. And so I didn't think about it. I picked up the phone and ordered a hamburger. And the hamburger didn't come. I'm the opening act, so I go on and I do what I'm supposed to do. And when I come back, I call again and say, I ordered a hamburger, and the hamburger didn't come. Well, now it's 11:45, and the hamburger still hasn't come. And I'm sharing a dressing room with Blossom Deary.
Deary, yes, yes.
And Blossom is having a fit. She's walking up and down the hall backstage, and she said, it's a damn shame this child is hungry and she can't get something to eat. And Mr. Sullivan came by and asked, what is wrong with you, Blossom? She said, it just doesn't make sense. When she came here, she ordered a hamburger and they won't give her anything to eat. How can she work with nothing to eat? He said, just a moment. And he goes to the telephone and he picks up the phone and he says, this is Ed Sullivan. And he's got the phone where I can hear what they're saying.
Right.
And he says, Miss Reese ordered a hamburger, and I don't understand why Miss Reese doesn't have the hamburger. And we get it right there, right away. And so he's, just a minute, what do you want on your hamburger? Well, I'm hungry. I don't care what they put on it. Just bring that. He said, no, tell me what. So I told him whatever it was that I wanted on the hamburger. The hamburger got there almost before he hung up the phone, you understand? So I'm grateful. So I'm eating and I'm just chugging it down because it's 15 minutes to 12. The show goes on at 12 and I got to open. And he said, no. If they'd have brought the hamburger, you'd be through eating by now. So just take your time. So he held up the show.
Good old Ed.
Until I got through eating. And every night after that, he took me on the Strip to one of the fabulous restaurants, sat me down in the middle of the room. People got up and walked out because I was in there and I was black and they didn't want to be in the room with me. But all the while I was there, he took me and gave me food and gave me some dignity, you see, and I hadn't thought about that. So when I was writing the book, I had a chance to experience that all over again. And I
All right. I'm gonna let me pop over here and stop this one. And you know what I want to say on that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts from hearing that story is, to me, there are two angels in that story. Blossom, because I don't believe Reverend Della was ever going to tell Ed Sullivan that there was a problem with a hamburger. I think she was going to suck it up and suffer because the black performers of her generation in that city were like, let me just get my check and go. So I don't think she would have ever said anything. I don't think she'd have showed up hungry to work again. But I don't think she would have said anything to Mr. Sullivan. And then, of course, Ed Sullivan is so clearly an angel in that story. Because one thing I know about Della Reese as well is that there was an inner knowing in her from childhood that she was a star. But in that moment, in that week in Las Vegas, he helped her have permission to like live it out loud and know that what she already knew to be true about her was in fact the truth and other people saw it too. So I just have always loved that story for all the different facets of it and for the history of Las Vegas in that. So I wanted to start with that story of hers. And let's see, John, do you have an angel story you want to tell?
I do. So the one that I chose, it'll take a wind up, so I'm going to watch the clock and make sure I don't go too long. So as I was going through the idea of maybe going into ministry, there are many steps you have to take. You take prep classes, and then you go into the first, at least at UFBL, you have to become a teacher first. So I went through that part. I'd taken the science of mind classes at a science of mind church, and I didn't quite have a road that I was necessarily going to do, but I had decided that if I was going to do ministry or go into ministry, that I would have to go back to New York and complete my college degree, because I did not want to have to explain to whatever seminary it was, Unity, UFBL, religious science, oh yeah, I went to school for 4 years, but I didn't get a degree. And I'm very successful in my career, and I don't need the degree. And Della had been giving me permission for 100,000 years that you don't need a degree to do anything. So I kind of wrote it off in the beginning when I came here and said, oh, I don't need a degree. But I wanted to go back and get this degree, which is the most impossible thing, because school is in New York and I'm based in LA. And all my work is done in LA. And how are you going to be in two places at once? And there are many angel stories I could tell about the school and the degree, but I went to pursue it, and I did, and I finished it in the spring of 2022. And I was sitting in a UFBL meeting as a board member, bragging to the board, because they asked, oh, what are you up to these days? And I said, oh, I just finished school. In all her wisdom, Dr. Anna Price, who's the provost of the Johnny Coleman Theological Seminary, says, you are never finished with school. And I was like, oh. And I said, these folks have designs on my life. And I had joined the UFBL board specifically to have direction and guidance about getting into seminary, even though I didn't know if UFBL was going to be the road that I took. And so in that moment, Dr. Price became the angel that gave that push. And so, May of 2022, the degree was set in New York. 1 week later, I think it was 9 days, they opened up seminary classes to go into ministerial school, and I had literally 5 days to make the decision. It's like, either you're going to do it or you're not going to do it. And I just pulled the trigger and jumped in. And the funny part about Dr. Anna Price, because there's really only 3 teachers in your seminary, and I was very curious to get her as a teacher because she was so revered, being the provost and an educator, and the position she held in UFBL. She was the only one who gave me an A minus. Everybody else I flew through and got good grades. So my angel, but even that was a blessing, because it said, her line was always, go deeper. If they make it easy for you, you gotta go deeper. And then I just want to tell you one other funny thing about her, since we're telling her being this angel, because she guided me through the next year in seminary. We're in class one day, and they were tough as you can imagine. No punches pulled in this walk you're taking. And we're in class, and she said, if John would only grow his hair. And I went, what? And then I went, oh my God, because I already thought I had very long hair, right? And I said, oh, she's thinking if John would just become this Jesus character, we could prop him up in this position. Because when they have designs on your life, somebody else sees you in a light, and they're going to be the one to push you. And, as Wally knows, the seminary walk started in 2022. Della left us in 2017. So my personal earth angel was gone, so a new one has to show up. And it showed up in the form of Dr. Anna Price. And as I shared with Reverend Elise and Wally, I finished the LNO project in April and received the ready to go. And so I'm setting the date for April of 2024, which is the 40th anniversary of Upchurch. So
awesome. That is awesome. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so I've got a few different videos lined up. So I want to do kind of a video and then one of our live people we've got here and a video. So I'm going to show you just a short, about a 3-minute video. And this is when Roma Downey came and spoke at Up Church as part of
Mm-hmm.
what was called Truth or Proof of the Truth. And I love this story. And Roma loves this story too, because she put it in her book uh, as well. But listen to Roma's story about being an angel for real.
And it's a prayer that I have tried to take through all things that I do in my life. We were filming in Salt Lake City, and my baby girl, Riley, had a minor physical issue when she was just a baby, but I had been introduced to this fabulous hospital facility that they have up there at Children's Hospital, and I went over to do some work at Christmas time. And I was coming by, I had a Santa hat on, and I was just trying to bring a little bit of joy and upliftment into the lives of the parents who had sick children at that season. And I was coming by a hospital room, and a family were exiting, and it was so clear that the child that they had been there for had passed. And it was the grief, you could feel it come out like a wind out of this room. And for a moment, I hardly knew what to do. I took off my Santa hat. And to be honest, I tried to be very small and disappear and give them the dignity of the moment that they needed. And the mother looked up and she recognized me from Touched by an Angel. And she said, "Oh, Monica, there you are," you know. And of course, part of me wanted to say, "Oh no, I'm not Monica. I'm not an angel, you know, I just play one on television." But I thankfully didn't say anything. And she threw her arms around me and she said, "Monica, I prayed that an angel would come for my baby. And here you are." And so I just held her in my arms and I quietly prayed with her. And I got back home and I was upset, you know, because I didn't want to be showing up and pretending to be anything that I wasn't. It was still, there was the first year of Touched by an Angel, and I still didn't really understand what we had been called to do. But thankfully, I had a teacher, and I called Della, and I told her this story, and she said, "So I don't understand what you're so upset about." It was so clear to her. It wasn't so clear to me. And I said, "But she thought that God had sent an angel to her." And Della said, "And who said he didn't?" She's right. She said, she said, that woman didn't need an actress, baby. She needed an angel. And if we're going to be used in this series for His highest good, then we need to learn to get out of the way. Huh?
I love that story as well. Let me get the video cut off on my end. It's still going. Ah. I love all the different ways. That's why I was wanting multiple people to share their stories and how it goes. And we talked about this in my church service yesterday. And look, I know a lot of people have different beliefs on who and what an angel is. But what we teach in unity is metaphysically, an angel is simply a spiritual thought, a thought connected to the divine. And what I kind of added to that definition in talking about it yesterday is like, so that when we feel like, these real life people showing up as angels, that's someone who simply said yes to the divine message, and the divine message was really the angel. And so that's what I kind of love about this celebration. Reverend Elise, will you share your story with us?
I would love to tell you my story. It was many years ago. I was 29 years old. Um, that would have been 1990. And up until that point in my life, I had been spiraling out of control. I was a high school dropout. I'd gotten into drugs. I was married, and my husband and I, we decided that we needed to change people, places, and things. And so we moved out of Birmingham, Alabama to South Alabama. And what we found when we got to South Alabama was other kinds of trouble. We weren't in the drugs and all that anymore, but we couldn't seem to make enough money to survive. The economy was different. And at times, Bill and I were both working two jobs just to make the ends meet. And I was just going into this really hard depression and thinking that I would never amount to anything. And I didn't have any self confidence. And one day, after we had been there about 9 months, some people from Bill's work invited us to go to a party down in Gulf Shores, which was about an hour drive. And we went down there. We were excited. Oh, somebody wants to be our friend. Oh boy, we were so excited. And we get there and we pulled up into the condo that they had rented parking lot, and they were all out there in the parking lot. And they were like, we're going to go down here to the Pink Pony. And y'all come on, follow us, go down to the Pink Pony. So that's what we did. If you've ever been to Gulf Shores, that's one popular place to go, to the Pink Pony. And Bill and I love to dance. And so we got up to dance to a song as the band was playing. And when the song finished playing, the party had left. They had just left us there, didn't tell us where they were going. And boy, we got really sad. What we had thought were people wanting to be our friends wasn't that at all. And we just fell into this really depression. We're like, okay, well, I guess we'll drive back home now. And after this, all of this time of just thinking that I wasn't any good, and this just confirmed that I'm a no good person. About halfway home, there was a a place for refreshments just out in the middle of the boondocks. And I told Bill, I was like, let's stop and have a refreshment. Let's just stop. And we got out and we went in, and I went up to the counter, and there was a jolly old man sitting there. He was bald and kind of big, like a Santa Claus character. And he looked at me and he said, I've been waiting for you. I was like, really? I don't even know you. I don't even come in here very much. And he's like, yeah, but I knew you were coming here today, and I came here to be with you. I have got some things that I need to tell you. And so we ended up sitting together. He was there with a woman, and we all became friends and hung out for an hour or so. And he invited us to come over to his to their house where they had these psychic gatherings, and this went on for a month or two. But he taught me how to relax. First of all, relax. Stop thinking that you're a worthless person, and let me help you, show you a better way of thinking and being. He taught me that, I can't believe everything I think, that I'm not my thoughts. And then the last thing he ever said to me was, find a unity church. And then he kind of just disappeared from my life, and I couldn't find him anymore. His name was Hal. Hal is my hero because he definitely changed my life. I began to think that I was somebody and that I did have purpose. And I ended up leaving that husband and going back to school, getting a college education, going to Unity, getting my master's degree. And it just literally changed my life. And I see Hal as my human angel that changed my life that day.
Oh, Wow. I love that.
So, as John was saying earlier, the lessons weren't over. I
Right.
had to keep learning along the way, and I still am. Um, but he took me and put me on a different path. He sure did.
Oh, that's incredible. Well, look, I will tell you, and this isn't the story I was planning on telling tonight, but becoming a unity minister for anybody who hasn't gone through, probably not just UWM, probably a lot of the different versions, but there's a lot of hoops to jump through. And I was already quite confident in the work that I was doing. I was already running a unity church, had been for several years, already had another ordinations and minister license from 2018, and I'd been studying unity since 2000, all that stuff. But going through all the hoops and then hitting the interview panels is challenging mentally, and like really starts to make you feel kind of I don't know, kind of pushed into a corner of being like, all right, I got to prove myself out of this. Well, just for my own psyche, right, of where I'm coming from, as a young teenager, I was picked on a lot in school. And I now know it's because I was a gay guy that was trying to hide who I was, and people recognized that I wasn't really being honest. And so that made me a target. So from that, I got really good at using my words to cut somebody down. I don't think I've ever punched somebody, but I put a bunch of people on the floor with my mouth. Um, and living in New York in the 90s, I got real good at it. And I used cuss words and all that one too. And so like it's something that, so when I'm doing my interview panels, at least you should know that you were the angel that stuck out for me out of that whole group. There were plenty of other mighty fine people who talked to me and asked me questions, but you're the only one that still holds in my memory of I felt comfortable, and I didn't feel like I needed to fight my way through this, right? And the feeling like I needed to fight my way through it was something I was really pushing back, because if I started that, I wasn't going to become a minister.
Right.
you know, and so like you really still, now a couple of years later, stick out as the one that like just felt like a safe zone where I could just speak from the place of knowing that I know what I know without needing to fight my way to it. So I think you're one of my angels through this whole process, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you for telling me that. That
Yeah.
warms my heart.
And you're also the one who told me that I was approved for licensing. You're the one that got to say it to me.
oh,
So
okay. I didn't remember that, but yeah. What was that, 2 years ago?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, I remembered how long ago it was.
Right, right. Yeah.
Thank you for telling me that. Yeah, so that's been a lifetime of learning for me, is to overcome any prejudices that I was taught as a
Yeah.
white child growing up in Alabama in the 1960s.
Right. Sure.
Um, so that's been a big learning curve for me. And
Yeah.
I love it. That's
Yeah.
right. So thank you
Spirit
for telling me that.
leads.
Warms my heart. Oh,
You're welcome. Thank you. Well, I want to share next a video from Reverend Sherry James, the senior minister at Up Church in Los Angeles. And let me find hers. I believe it is here. Here we go.
It is my joy to share my angel story. And I will tell you, I am fulfilling this assignment kicking and screaming. This is me kicking and screaming. But the reason it's kicking and screaming is I don't often think about or think of the world in terms of angels. That's just not a term that I use a lot personally, but we're here to celebrate my spiritual mother, who is responsible for the work that I'm doing right now as the senior minister of the community that she founded, Understanding Principles. Oh, I guess I should have said, hi, I'm Reverend Sherry James. I'm the senior minister for Understanding Principles. But if I had to think of an angel that has been a part of my life, I've had angels at many steps along the way that were there for pivotal moments. And so the first angel that I'm going to talk about, her name was Mary. Mary Ashley. I don't know if I know her middle name, but Mary Ashley. She was known to me affectionately as my play mom. And I had been in an accident when I was in my late teens. So I was 18, 19. I was interning at a company called Amoco, which is now called BP. And I was involved in a work accident that left the bottom half of my legs from the knees down completely burned by water, completely burned. And the company was freaking out. They're worried about me, filing a lawsuit. I wish I knew enough to file a lawsuit. I didn't. It's a whole other thing. But I am in a hospital and I'm being treated for these burns. And for whatever reason, my play mom, who was the head of nursing for Ben Taub Hospital in Houston, said, get your daughter to a burn center. And we didn't know sick 'em from come here, but my mom listened to her. And what was happening at the time was that my legs were swelling from the burns. And what I didn't know was that I was running the danger of getting an infection and having that infection spread and then turn to gangrene and then amputation. And because my play mom said, get your daughter to a burn center, and my mom listened, because I didn't know and my mom definitely didn't know, I was moved to a burn center where they knew how to care for me, for the injuries that I had sustained, and to make sure that, I got back to full health and retained full mobility in my body. So that was many moons ago, but that is one of my angel stories. Another one of my angels was a colleague of Reverend Della's, and this was Reverend Mary Tumpkin. And I had just been introduced to New Thought. I was really kind of soft on church, kind of take it or leave it. But I got a chance to hear Reverend Mary speak in the summer of 1998, July 1998 to be exact. And that message touched me just deeply. It opened something up in me that I didn't even know was available to me. And because of the work that she did, it shifted my life. And it started me on this path, this quest for knowledge and for understanding. And then finally, of course, my spiritual mother, Reverend Della, who came to me in March 2009 and said, God told me that it's time to pick an assistant minister, and God told me you. And I was like, okay. Didn't know what I was saying yes to or any of that, but it absolutely shaped the course of my life. And so those are just some of the angels along the way in my life. God bless.
Love me some Sherry James. She's my sister from another mister. And I did harass her a few times before getting that video. So, but when you're close to somebody, you can harass them more than if you don't know them all that well. So, all right, I do want to share my own story, but the lead into my story, there's about a minute long video of Reverend Della's that I'm going to share first. Let me get myself to it any old second now. Let's see, that's not letting me do that. Let me back out for 1 second and go over here and push some buttons. I'm not the IT guy, in case you've not figured that out on your own. So I do really good to find buttons and hit them. Okay, here we go. Right here. This is from a service that Reverend Dilla did that was entitled "Watch Your Mouth."
It was having some financial trouble,
Oh wait, let me
and the
back it.
rent was due at him, whatever it is. And see, it said what you're missing is the excitement of it. You see, that's what hooks me up. It's exciting. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know where. A male friend of ours was having some financial trouble, and the rent was due at his house, and he didn't have the money to pay the rent. And he wasn't asking me. He was just in conversation telling me what was happening. And I said, I'll help. And at the time, I didn't have any money that I could see to help him with. But as soon as I said that, I said, Father, I must have, he needed $500. I said, Father, I must have 500 in here somewhere. And went on about what I was doing. I got a check in the mail not 2 hours after I said that. That was for $5,300. So I had 5 plus. And that's a simple rule. That's a very simple rule. Give and you shall receive. You see?
Let me cut off the video on my end here. So I wanted to play that first because I'm the guy she's talking about in that video. And and it was also a little bit more than $500. I think it was closer to $700 actually. But you know, in Della Reese world, $200 more don't make no difference at all. And what happened was it was, you know, there was a good chunk of time that I lived in Los Angeles that I was check to check. And I mean, there was a stack of bills on my desk and I would order them in the stack by the due date. But I then, when a check came in, I would look to see how much money I had and see which bills that chunk of change was going to cover, and then you know see it never got rid of the whole stack during these times. Well, this was during the summer, and I was earning my living mostly doing stand-in work and extra work on TV shows. And this was during the summer hiatus time, so I was living off of unemployment mostly, trying to pick up a little job here or there. And I always kept enough money to, you know, keep the bills paid, and often to keep good credit. I meant, you know, I kept good credit through the whole time. And often I did that by, I would do a balance transfer from one card to another because that counted as a payment. And I'd keep that one afloat for a little bit longer. And suddenly it was getting ready to be rent time. And I looked and I was like, I don't have enough to pay next month's rent. And I'm about a week away. And I'm like, I don't have enough to pay. And there are no checks already en route. Like if I work today, I'm not going to get a check in time to pay that just the way my work at that time was going. So this was the thinking process. And I was like, I'm not really sure. I've never not paid my rent. I'm not sure. Well, during this same time, every Wednesday night, there was a group of us, and John was in that group. John was probably at the table the night I said this. I didn't ask anybody for money. I um I don't know if I can say I've never borrowed money from anybody, but I certainly during that time when I was in the most financial need wouldn't ask people to borrow money because I couldn't see a way of ever paying them back. And I didn't want to borrow. I knew people in LA that didn't have a problem at all borrowing money when they knew they were never going to pay it back. Um, but I didn't want to do that, you know. So when we would do spiritual prosperity books. We would study Catherine Ponder, and uh, that's the one that really sticks out to me the most. But we were up there, and so I just asked this group sitting around the table to agree and affirm with me and go into prayer that this was going to work out. That I didn't know how, but I was releasing any fear and I was accepting that it was going to work out. Well, the next day I'd called and I'd kind of told my mom what was going on. Again, I didn't ask her for the money. I was just telling her kind of this is what's going on. And somehow between now and next week, I'm gonna have the money. I don't know how yet, but I'm gonna have the money. Well, my mama got off the phone and called my Aunt Joe. That was my dad's sister. Um, and Aunt Joe said, "How much is his rent?" Mama told her 600. That was wrong too. I think it was 695 was my half. Well, Aunt Joe sent me a check for $600. Well, then later that day, I looked and I realized I had in almost in name only, I had a savings account on top of my checking account. And I realized there was just enough money in there to move over to checking that I could actually, because I didn't know a check was coming from my Aunt Joe. Um, I was like, there's just enough money actually in savings. I do have enough to pay my rent. Hallelujah, answered prayer, you know. And then I called uh, Reverend Della to tell her that. And she said, well, I don't care anything about that. I'm going to pay your rent. And I said, well, but I figured out that I have enough money. She said, what you have is no interest to me at all. I said, I'm going to pay your rent. And so at the end of the day, I ended up going from thinking I didn't have enough money to pay my rent to having 3 times what I needed to pay my rent. And when she gave me the check that day, and this was at the church, the Lutheran church that we were meeting at down in Inglewood, I remember, I can almost see the moment. She asked me for the amount, and I told her. She wrote the check, and she handed it to me. And this was before church started. She said, "Don't tell anybody about this." And I never talked about it, you know, the rest of the time she was alive. I'll tell it now because can't nobody else come ask her for money.
Right.
That's why she didn't want me to tell it at church. And nobody else can come ask her for the money now. So I feel comfortable telling the story. But she was an angel to me in many, many ways. I'm a minister because of her. I found unity because of her. I'd never heard of unity. I just wanted to go see one of my favorite TV stars that I heard was running a church in Beverly Hills at the time. And that's how I learned about unity. And then we grew close and we had a wonderful group that met and all of that stuff. And the life that I'm leading now was never in my plan. And, you know, but that's where we got to, you know. So, and I'm grateful for all of it. And I love the life I'm leading now, you know. We can take a couple of tweaks here and there, but I'm very happy with the life. And so that's the story I wanted to tell of like how, you know, the famous TV angel really showed up as an angel in my life in a whole lot of ways. But this was one when I was looking for the video clip of her telling her Las Vegas story or her telling her healing story. I came across that video and I was like, oh, she's talking about me. I've got video
Mm.
of her talking about me. And so I decided to share that one this year. But I thank you, Elise and John, for joining me live, and we thank Reverend Sherry for getting us her video. And Roma doesn't know she participated in tonight's program, but I thank her anyway. And thank Della and thank everybody who's watching. And you know, I just want to encourage people to kind of think about the people who said yes to divine information and showed up in everybody's lives as angels, whether you think of them in that title or not. You don't have to give them a title you don't want to give them. But like, you know, find those people and let them know that you're remembering a time that they really showed up for you and you really appreciated it. And just saying thank you to somebody could be being an angel in their moment, in you know, because we never know what somebody's got going on. There's a meme I've seen a couple of times today on Facebook that said something along the lines of, just because I carry it well doesn't mean it's not heavy. And that's to say, we never know what somebody's got going on that they're maybe just not talking about. And just because they're smiling doesn't mean they don't have some stuff happening. So, you know, showing up with just a nice thank you is a wonderful thing. So I thank everybody for joining us. I say happy birthday month to my godmother, Reverend Della Reese, and have a good night.
Thanks, Wally.
Bless. God bless.
Yes.